The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training facility in Virginia Beach. Sarah Chen adjusted her rifle scope one final time, her breathing steady despite the incredible challenge ahead. Next to her, Maria Rodriguez checked her ammunition count for the third time, a nervous habit she'd developed during her years as a police sniper. "You sure about this?" Maria whispered, watching the group of 20 Navy SEALs gathering at the opposite end of the massive outdoor range. Each SEAL wore full combat gear, their weapons gleaming in the early light. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were among the most elite fighters in the world. Sarah nodded, her dark eyes never leaving the targets. "We've trained for this moment our entire lives. 2 years of preparation can't be for nothing." The challenge had started as a joke during a military conference 6 months earlier. Commander Jake Morrison, a decorated SEAL with 15 years of experience, had laughed when someone suggested that 2 female civilian sharpshooters could outshoot his entire unit. The comment stung Sarah, who held 3 national shooting championships, and Maria, whose police record included the longest confirmed sniper shot in her department's history. What began as wounded pride had evolved into something much bigger. The media caught wind of the story, calling it David versus Goliath with rifles. Military experts debated whether skill could triumph over training and teamwork. Betting pools formed across military bases worldwide. The rules were simple but brutal. 20 targets would be placed at varying distances from 200 to 800 meters. Each target represented a different challenge, some stationary, others moving, several partially concealed. The SEALs would work as a coordinated team, using their standard military tactics and communication. Sarah and Maria would have only each other. Colonel Patricia Williams, the range supervisor, raised her megaphone. "Competitors, take your positions. You have 15 minutes to study the course before the competition begins." Sarah pulled out her binoculars, scanning each target methodically. Target 1 sat 300 meters away, a standard bullseye mounted on a post. Easy enough. Target 2 moved slowly left to right at 400 meters, a mechanical system designed to simulate enemy movement. Target 3, positioned at 500 meters, was partially hidden behind a concrete barrier with only a small portion visible. "Look at number 7. Maria pointed toward the far end of the range. A target sat perched on a platform 650 meters away, barely visible to the naked eye. "That's going to be trouble." The SEALs had spread out along their firing line, each man claiming a position. Their leader, Commander Morrison, studied the course through his own scope. His team had worked together for years, developing an almost telepathic understanding of each other's movements and capabilities. They knew who excelled at long-range shots, who was best with moving targets, and how to divide responsibilities for maximum efficiency. Sarah watched them coordinate their strategy. Unlike her and Maria, who would each need to engage multiple targets, the SEALs could specialize. Their best long-range shooter could focus entirely on the distant targets while others handled closer or moving ones. "They're going to try to overwhelm us with speed," Sarah observed. 20 shooters can engage all targets simultaneously. We'll have to be faster and more accurate than should be humanly possible." Maria checked her rifle one more time. Her weapon was a custom-built precision instrument that she'd spent years perfecting. Every component had been selected and fine-tuned for her specific shooting style. Sarah's rifle was equally impressive, a competition-grade piece that had helped her win countless tournaments. The crowd gathering behind the safety barriers continued to grow. Military personnel, reporters, and curious civilians had come to witness this unprecedented challenge. Television cameras from 3 major networks pointed toward the firing line. Social media buzzed with predictions and commentary. 5 minutes remaining, Colonel Williams announced. Sarah closed her eyes, running through her mental preparation routine. She visualized each target, calculating wind speed, distance, and the arc of her bullets. Years of competitive shooting had taught her to trust her instincts and maintain calm under pressure. Maria stretched her shoulders, working out the tension. She'd faced high-pressure situations before, during her police career, but nothing quite like this. 20 of the world's most elite soldiers stood ready to prove that teamwork and military training trumped individual skill. Commander Morrison gathered his men for a final briefing. "Remember, this isn't about individual glory. We move as one unit. Johnson and Peters take targets 15 through 20. Martinez and Brown handle the movers. Everyone else, divide up the remaining stationary targets. Call your shots, loud and clear. The SEALs nodded in unison. Their confidence was evident, built from years of successful missions and intense training. They'd faced enemy fire, completed impossible missions, and earned their reputation as an unstoppable force. Sarah and Maria had no such team unity to rely on. They'd trained together for only 2 years, meeting every weekend at various shooting ranges across the country. Their partnership was built on mutual respect and shared determination rather than military precision. "Time," Colonel Williams called out. The competitors took their final positions. Sarah lay prone behind her rifle, the stock pressed firmly against her shoulder. Maria knelt beside her, choosing a different shooting stance that gave her more flexibility for quick target transitions. The silence stretched across the range. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if nature itself was holding its breath for this extraordinary moment. Colonel Williams raised her starter pistol. "On my mark, 3, 2, 1. The sharp crack of the starting pistol echoed across the facility. 20 Navy SEALs immediately began firing, their shots creating a thunderous symphony of precision and power. Brass casings flew through the air as they engaged targets with military efficiency. Sarah and Maria moved with fluid grace, their rifles swinging from target to target with practiced ease. They had decided on a strategy during their preparation. Sarah would take the odd-numbered targets, while Maria handled the even ones, but both remained flexible enough to adapt as the situation demanded. The first shots found their marks almost instantly. Sarah's bullet struck target number 1 dead center, while Maria's round shattered target number 2 with equal precision. The SEALs were hitting their targets as well, but the coordination required for 20 shooters to work together created slight delays that the 2 women exploited. Target number 3 proved more challenging. The partially concealed bullseye required perfect shot placement to strike the visible portion. Maria adjusted her aim, accounting for the wind that had picked up since the competition began. Her shot rang out, striking the exposed edge of the target. The crowd behind the barriers began to murmur with excitement. Television commentators spoke in hushed tones, amazed by the display of marksmanship from both sides. Sarah swung her rifle toward target number 5, positioned 600 meters away on an elevated platform. This was the type of long-range shot that separated good shooters from great ones. She controlled her breathing, let her heart rate settle, and squeezed the trigger with the patience of a surgeon. The bullet traveled for nearly 2 seconds before striking its mark. Even at that distance, the impact was visible through the spotting scopes operated by range officials. Commander Morrison watched the 2 women with growing respect and concern. His SEALs were performing flawlessly, but Sarah and Maria were matching them shot for shot. What should have been a demonstration of military superiority was turning into a genuine contest. Target number 7. The 650-meter shot that had worried Maria earlier loomed ahead. She knew this would be one of the most difficult shots of her career. The distance alone was challenging enough, but the target was also smaller than the others, requiring absolute precision. Maria settled into her shooting position, her body becoming perfectly still. Years of police training had taught her to find calm in chaos, to shut out distractions, and focus entirely on the task at hand. She could hear the SEALs continuing to fire around her, but their shots seemed distant and unimportant. The crosshairs of her scope centered on the tiny target. Wind speed, bullet drop, and a dozen other variables flashed through her mind in the fraction of a second before she fired. Her shot struck the target with a satisfying ping that carried across the range. The spotting scope confirmed a perfect hit, dead center of the bullseye. The competition was far from over, but something had shifted in the atmosphere. What began as an expected demonstration of SEAL superiority was becoming a showcase of extraordinary individual skill. Sarah and Maria were proving that 2 people, working in perfect harmony and pushing the absolute limits of human capability, could stand toe-to-toe with an elite military unit. Colonel Williams watched through her binoculars, making notes for the official record. In her 20-year military career, she had never witnessed anything quite like this. The precision and speed displayed by both sides was remarkable, but there was something almost supernatural about watching Sarah and Maria work together. As the first phase of the competition drew to a close, both sides had hit their assigned targets with incredible accuracy. The real test was yet to come, as the remaining targets would push everyone involved to their absolute limits. The second phase brought an unexpected twist. Colonel Williams announced over the loudspeaker that the remaining 10 targets would be released randomly across the range, some moving unpredictably while others would appear and disappear behind cover. This wasn't just a test of accuracy anymore. It was a test of adaptability and quick thinking. Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead despite the cool morning air. The intensity of the competition was unlike anything she'd experienced in her tournament career. Competition shooting was precise and controlled, with known distances and stable conditions. This felt like combat. Commander Morrison's voice cut through the air as he directed his team. Delta formation. Maintain sight lines. When targets appear, call out positions immediately. His men repositioned themselves with military precision, creating overlapping fields of fire that would allow them to engage targets anywhere on the range within seconds. Maria noticed the tactical advantage the SEALs were creating. 20 pairs of eyes scanning the range meant nothing would go unnoticed for long. She and Sarah would need to rely on their individual skills and the intuitive partnership they'd developed during 2 years of intensive training together. The first random target popped up 400 meters to the left, a moving platform that zigzagged across an open area. 3 SEALs immediately called out its position, but Sarah had already spotted it. Her rifle swung smoothly toward the target, tracking its erratic movement. She fired just as the platform changed direction, her bullet intercepting its path perfectly. "Incredible shot," muttered Sergeant Mike Peters, one of the SEALs watching through his scope. His appreciation for their opponents was growing with each round fired. Before the echo of Sarah's shot had faded, another target appeared behind a series of barriers 550 meters away. Only the top portion was visible, and it would disappear again within seconds. Maria was ready, her rifle already pointed in that direction based on pure instinct. Her shot found its mark just before the target vanished. The crowd behind the barriers was completely silent now, mesmerized by the display of skill. Military experts in the viewing area began reconsidering their predictions. What should have been an easy victory for the SEALs was becoming a masterclass in precision shooting. Commander Morrison felt a bead of sweat roll down his back. His men were performing exactly as trained, but these 2 women were operating on a level that defied explanation. Every shot they took seemed effortless, as if they could see things before they happened. Target number 12 emerged from behind a concrete wall, moving laterally at a steady pace 700 meters away. SEAL sniper Tommy Johnson had this type of shot memorized from countless training exercises. He tracked the movement, calculated the lead time, and fired. His bullet struck the target cleanly, but Sarah was already engaging target 13, which had appeared simultaneously on the opposite side of the range. The target moved in an unpredictable pattern, accelerating and decelerating randomly. She waited for the right moment. When the target's movement briefly stabilized, and took her shot. Another perfect hit. The coordination between Sarah and Maria was becoming almost supernatural. They seemed to communicate without words, dividing targets instinctively based on position, difficulty, and timing. Years of weekend training sessions had created a partnership that transcended normal teamwork. Maria spotted target 14 before anyone else. It was positioned 600 meters away, behind a series of vertical posts, with only small portions visible between the gaps. This was the type of precision shot that separated professionals from amateurs. The target would be exposed for less than 3 seconds as it moved between the posts. She controlled her breathing, settling into the perfect shooting position. The crosshairs of her scope followed the target's movement as it approached the gap. Just as the bullseye became fully visible, she squeezed the trigger. The bullet passed cleanly between the posts and struck dead center. Several SEALs exchanged glances. They were witnessing something extraordinary, even by their elevated standards. These weren't just skilled shooters, they were artists with rifles. The 15th target proved to be the most challenging yet. It appeared briefly at 750 meters. farther than any previous shot, and moved in a complex pattern that combined lateral movement with changes in elevation. The target would rise and fall while moving left and right, creating a three-dimensional puzzle that required perfect timing and calculation. Commander Morrison took this shot personally. As the team leader and their most experienced long-range specialist, he felt responsible for maintaining SEAL honor. He studied the target's pattern through his scope, calculating the precise moment when all variables would align. Sarah was studying the same target, running similar calculations in her mind. But where Morrison relied on military training and proven formulas, she trusted something deeper. An intuitive understanding of ballistics that had been refined through years of competition pressure. Both shooters fired almost simultaneously. Two bullets traced nearly identical paths through the air, separated by mere milliseconds. Morrison's shot struck the target first, but Sarah's bullet hit the same spot a fraction of a second later, both holes overlapping in the exact center of the bullseye. The range fell completely silent. Even the most experienced marksman in the crowd had never seen anything like that. Two shooters hitting the same incredibly difficult target within milliseconds of each other. Target 16 brought another surprise. It appeared at a moderate distance of 350 meters, but it was smaller than all the previous targets. Barely the size of a dinner plate. Precision would matter more than distance for this shot. SEAL marksman Carlos Martinez lined up his shot carefully. At this range, there was no margin for error with such a small target. His bullet struck near the edge. A hit, but not a perfect one. Maria approached the same target differently. She had learned during her police career that sometimes the most difficult shots required absolute confidence, rather than careful calculation. She acquired the target quickly and fired with decisive authority. Her bullet struck dead center. The psychological pressure was beginning to affect both sides. The SEALs, accustomed to success, found themselves pushed to their absolute limits by two civilian women. Sarah and Maria, meanwhile, were performing beyond their own expectations, driven by adrenaline and the knowledge that they were making history. Target 17 appeared at 500 meters, but with a twist, it moved behind a series of transparent barriers that would deflect bullets slightly. This required knowledge of how projectiles behave when passing through different materials, something typically learned only through extensive field experience. The SEALs had encountered similar challenges during combat operations. Corporal James Wilson adjusted his aim to account for the bullet deflection and fired. His shot struck the target, but the deflection caused it to hit several inches off center. Sarah had no combat experience with deflection shots, but her competition background included shooting through various atmospheric conditions that created similar effects. She made an instinctive adjustment based on physics and experience, firing with confidence. Her bullet passed through the barriers and struck the center of the target. By now, the media personnel were frantically taking notes and adjusting their stories. This wasn't going according to anyone's predictions. The betting pools that had heavily favored the SEALs were becoming much more interesting propositions. Target 18 challenged everyone's ability to adapt under pressure. It appeared at 650 meters but immediately began spinning rapidly while moving laterally. Hitting a spinning target required perfect timing. The shot had to be fired at the precise moment when the target's rotation presented the largest surface area. Multiple SEALs acquired the target, but the complexity of tracking both rotation and lateral movement proved overwhelming. Several shots missed entirely, while others struck glancing blows that barely counted as hits. Maria watched the target's movement pattern, identifying the rhythm of its rotation. She noticed that every third spin brought the target into the optimal position for a brief moment. She waited patiently, her rifle tracking the lateral movement while counting rotations. On the third cycle, she fired. Her bullet struck the spinning target perfectly, stopping its rotation with the impact. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause, unable to contain their amazement at such an impossible shot. Colonel Williams checked her scorecards, hardly believing the numbers she was recording. Both sides had performed at levels that would be talked about for years to come, but the two women were matching and sometimes exceeding the performance of one of the world's most elite military units. Target 19 appeared at a deceptive 400 meters. The distance seemed manageable, But the target was positioned behind a heat shimmer, created by portable heaters. The rising air created a distortion effect that made precise aiming nearly impossible. The SEALs approached this systematically, with different team members taking shots and adjusting based on the results. After 3 attempts, Sergeant Rodriguez finally compensated correctly for the distortion and hit the target. Sarah studied the shimmer effect, remembering similar conditions from desert shooting competitions. She understood that the distortion followed predictable patterns based on air temperature and wind conditions. Instead of fighting the shimmer, she used it. Timing her shot for a moment when the distortion briefly stabilized, her bullet found its mark on the first attempt. As the competition approached its climax with only 1 target remaining, both sides had pushed themselves beyond what anyone thought possible. The SEALs had demonstrated why they were considered among the world's finest warriors. Sarah and Maria had proven that individual skill, when refined to its absolute peak, could compete with the best military training and teamwork. The final target would determine the outcome of this extraordinary challenge, and neither side was prepared to concede defeat. The 20th and final target would determine the outcome of the most extraordinary shooting competition anyone had ever witnessed. Colonel Williams announced that this target would combine every challenge from the previous 19: extreme distance, movement, partial concealment, and time pressure. The target appeared at 800 meters, the maximum range of the facility. It moved in an unpredictable pattern while partially hidden behind obstacles, and would only remain active for 90 seconds before the competition ended. Both sides would have multiple opportunities to engage, but success would require everything they had learned and more. Commander Morrison gathered his remaining team members who hadn't yet fired during this final phase. "This is what we trained for. Multiple shooters, coordinated fire. We put everything we have into this last target, and we walk away knowing we gave our absolute best." His men nodded grimly. They had enormous respect for their opponents now, but 20 years of military training and pride wouldn't allow them to accept defeat without emptying everything they had left. Sarah and Maria exchanged a glance that communicated volumes. 2 years of preparation had led to this single moment. They had proven they could compete with the best, but proving they could win would require something beyond skill. It would require magic. "You take the first shot," Maria whispered. "I'll watch the pattern and follow up if needed." Sarah nodded, settling into her shooting position with the calm of someone who had trained her entire life for this moment. The target appeared briefly between 2 concrete barriers, moving left to right at a speed that seemed almost impossible to track. She fired her first shot, leading the target by what felt like the right amount. The bullet struck the edge of the target. A hit, but not the center strike she needed. The SEALs immediately began engaging with coordinated fire from multiple positions. 3 SEAL bullets struck the target within seconds of each other. But the movement and distance made precise shot placement incredibly difficult. Several shots missed entirely as the target changed direction unexpectedly. Maria studied the target's movement pattern while Sarah reloaded. She noticed something the others had missed. The target's seemingly random movement actually followed a complex but repeating cycle every 15 seconds. If she could time her shot for the right moment in that cycle, she could anticipate where the target would be, instead of reacting to where it was. The target completed another cycle and began repeating its pattern. Maria counted seconds in her head, her rifle tracking the movement smoothly. At the 12-second mark, she fired at a point in space where the target would be, rather than where it currently was. Her bullet struck the center of the target just as it moved into the predicted position. The impact was so precise that the target's movement mechanism jammed, causing it to stop moving entirely for several crucial seconds. Commander Morrison saw the opportunity immediately. A stationary target at 800 meters was still challenging, but manageable for his best long-range shooters. "Johnson, Martinez, take the shot now while it stopped." Both SEALs fired simultaneously at the stationary target. Their bullets struck within inches of Maria's shot, clustering in the center ring of the bullseye. It was exactly the kind of coordinated precision that had made the SEALs legendary. But Sarah had been watching too, and she had noticed something else. The target's jamming mechanism was temporary. It would resume moving within seconds, and when it did, it would start a completely new movement pattern. She had one chance to hit it again before anyone could adapt to the new pattern. Her shot rang out just as the target began moving again, this time in a diagonal pattern that no one had seen before. Her bullet intercepted the target at the exact moment it changed direction, striking it with such force that the entire mechanism stopped working permanently. The range fell silent except for the distant sound of the target's broken machinery grinding to a halt. In 90 seconds of intense firing, both sides had achieved something remarkable. The SEALs had demonstrated flawless teamwork and coordination under pressure. Sarah and Maria had shown that individual skill, refined to an almost superhuman level, could match the performance of an elite military unit. Colonel Williams approached the scoring table where range officials had been meticulously recording every shot. The crowd pressed against the barriers, desperate to hear the results of this unprecedented competition. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colonel Williams announced, her voice carrying clearly across the silent range, "in my 20 years of military service, I have never witnessed a display of marksmanship like what we have seen here today." She paused, checking her scorecard one final time. Both teams achieved remarkable accuracy under incredibly difficult conditions. The final scores are so close that this competition should be considered a testament to human capability rather than a simple victory for either side. The tension was unbearable as she prepared to announce the results. The United States Navy SEALs achieved a combined accuracy rating of 94.7% across all 20 targets. This represents shooting that would be considered legendary under normal circumstances. A murmur went through the crowd. 94.7% was an almost impossible standard of accuracy for such difficult conditions. Sarah Chen and Maria Rodriguez achieved a combined accuracy rating of 95.1%. The range erupted. Media personnel shouted questions, spectators cheered, and even some of the SEALs applauded. The difference was razor thin, less than half a percentage point, but it represented something that would be remembered for generations. Commander Morrison walked across the range to where Sarah and Maria were standing. His face showed a mixture of disappointment and genuine admiration. "That was the finest shooting I've ever witnessed," he said, extending his hand. "You've earned something today that can't be measured in scores or statistics. You've earned the respect of every warrior on this range." Sarah shook his hand, still somewhat stunned by what they had accomplished. "Your team pushed us beyond anything we thought possible. We couldn't have achieved this without that level of competition." Maria was surrounded by reporters asking how two civilians had managed to outshoot Navy SEALs. Her answer was simple. "We didn't outshoot them. We shot alongside them at a level none of us knew was possible. Today wasn't about winning or losing. It was about finding out how far human skill can be pushed when everything is on the line." The story would spread around the world within hours. Military experts would debate the implications for months. Shooting ranges would see enrollment skyrocket as people tried to emulate what they had witnessed. But for the participants, the real victory was something more personal. The SEALs had proven that their training and teamwork could compete with the very best individual talent in the world. They had maintained their honor while showing respect for opponents who had earned it through exceptional performance. Sarah and Maria had proven that dedication, skill, and partnership could achieve things that seemed impossible. They had shown that the human spirit, when refined through years of passionate pursuit, could rise to meet any challenge. As the crowd began to disperse and the media packed up their equipment, the 22 competitors gathered together for a final moment. They had shared something extraordinary, an experience that pushed all of them beyond their previous limits and into territory that would likely never be reached again. The targets were collected, the range was cleared, and life began to return to normal. But everyone who witnessed that morning in Virginia Beach knew they had seen something special. A demonstration of human potential that would inspire shooters and athletes for generations to come. Commander Morrison looked back at the range one final time before leaving. His SEALs had not lost today. They had participated in something legendary. Sarah and Maria had not simply won a competition. They had proven that with enough dedication and skill, any challenge could be met. The final scorecard would be framed and hung in the facility's office. But the real victory belonged to everyone who pushed themselves beyond what they thought possible. In the end, the question wasn't whether two people could outshoot 20 Navy SEALs. It was whether human beings could achieve things that seemed impossible when they refused to accept limitations. The answer, recorded in history and witnessed by hundreds, was an unqualified yes. Sarah Chen and Maria Rodriguez had faced 20 of the world's most elite warriors and proven that exceptional individual skill, refined through years of dedicated practice, could stand alongside the finest military training in the world. Their victory was measured in fractions of percentage points, but its significance would be measured in inspiration for anyone who dared to believe that the impossible was simply another word for untested.